Calling the meeting to order, Noblesville Common Council for Tuesday, April 14th. We're coming at you a little bit differently, but we're all kind of used to this world right now as observing social distancing guidelines. We are with you from Microsoft Teams, but the business of the city of Noblesville continues, and we are ready here on not only on Microsoft Teams, but for those of you maybe joining us tonight, there are a couple places to watch this, HamiltonCountyTelevision.com and also Facebook at Hamilton County Television. Citizens who are interested in calling in to participate either with a comment about a specific item on the agenda, you can do so. I'm going to give you the number a couple of times. Here is the number to call if you're a citizen that wants to get involved in this meeting tonight. 317-776-6333. And again, 317-776-6333. And when you get on, you'll be prompted and you'll have to dial in this number, 389-246-89#. 389-246-89#. If you didn't write it down, I'll try to repeat it here in a minute. But first, let's get started like we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance. Our IT director, Jamie Yost, has done such great work for everyone here in the city to get us all online and to make it happen. And Jamie, Mr. Yost, if you could lead us in tonight's Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Yost. Let's start now with the roll call vote. Ms. Lees, we have a roll call for attendance. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Ayer?
Present.
Mr. Boyce?
present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Schwartz? Mr. Smith?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lees. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 24th, 2020 meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
help?
who
sorry.
made the motion?
Mark Boyce moved. Greg O'Connor seconded.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. This will also be, normally this is a hand vote when we're all sitting side by side, but we're going to do another roll call vote for the approval of the minutes. Ms. Lees.
Mr. Ayer?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
The minutes are approved.
All right, thank you. Next up, the approval of the agenda for tonight. Is there a motion and a second?
Mr. President, I'd move approval of the agenda as submitted. This is O'Connor.
Second.
Second Wiles seconds the agenda, the motion.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and this will again be a roll call. Ms. Lees.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Ayer?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
The agenda is approved.
Thank you very much. Did Mr. Schwartz join us? I saw somebody popped in. Was that him?
Mr. Schwartz, are you with us?
No. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought
Okay.
I thought somebody come through.
I'm counting him as absent unless someone tells me different.
Yeah, technology, he might be trying to. 317-776-6333 is again the number for any comments from the citizens. Again, you'll have to be, when prompted, 389-246-89. Miss Lees, is there anyone on the line that is wanting to make a comment at this point?
I think Mr. Yost would know that. I don't know of anyone.
Okay. Mr. Yost?
Mr. President, I don't hear anybody on the line at this time.
Okay. So with no one on the line, I know our mayor, Mayor Chris Jensen, would like to use this opportunity on the agenda to have a comment. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words tonight. I just want to start by thanking all of our residents who have really stepped up to the plate these last couple weeks and have really heeded the advice of federal, state, and local leaders to, as Governor Holcomb so eloquently put it, hunker down Hoosiers. I know that's not easy, but I appreciate all that have. I appreciate the council for helping to be a voice in that. We have tried every way possible to communicate all that we have learned and all that we'll continue to learn, and I appreciate you all for being great advocates for us. The health and safety of our community is obviously job number one for all of us. So I just appreciate all of your support. I appreciate the residents' support, and I know it's not easy. As I sit here surrounded by 3 kids and 3 dogs, I know that everyone is adjusting their life to fit this world that we're living in. So thank you for adjusting and taking this very seriously. City Hall is operating at a very skeletal crew. As you can imagine, most of our employees are working from home currently. I say that only because the service that we're providing our citizens has not stopped. We are still functioning at mostly full capacity in terms of city services. We have dialed back some of our cosmetic services, brush pickup, for example, some of the flower planting in downtown. We have dialed that back, but we are here to provide our citizens with the services that we have laid out and we are expected to do. So I thank city employees for adjusting their lives a little bit as well. We will continue operating that way until given further guidance. I know on Friday, Governor Holcomb has promised to give an update on his 2-week stay-at-home order, which is set to expire next Monday. So we will be prepared to adjust accordingly. And we have already started collaborating with members of the council and different business community members to think about what that looks like when we are safely allowed to open up the city of Noblesville, economically speaking, to do that in a proper and safe way. So be on the lookout for more guidance as that comes forth from our friends at the federal, state, and local level. I want to also touch on something that you're going to be talking about quite a bit tonight, which is the Noblesville Small Business Resilience Grant. It's a grant that I'm proud to say that we launched 2 weeks ago, and we're probably the first in the state to launch such a program. And we often get flack sometimes for government not moving so quickly. And I would agree with that most of the time, but I applaud the efforts that have been laid out today in the last couple of weeks to move as quickly as possible to get some relief to some of our small businesses across the city. We had 209 applicants for that grant. They had 72 hours to apply because we had to turn around dollars so quickly. So 72 hours to apply. 209 applicants took advantage of that grant program, requesting almost $1.9 million. And as you all know individually, we have about $250,000 to give out. So that really expressed a huge need in our community. But I really want to thank several groups of people for stepping up internally. Kayla Arnold, who, as you all know, the council approved funding to bring on a new person focused on community development. Kayla helped spearhead this, along with Matt Light, our deputy mayor, and Michelle Gladowski, as well as Sarah Reed, helped with some internal scoring. I really want to thank Megan Wiles and Mike Davis on the council, as well as Bob Dubois, who helped on the selection committee. They can attest that was no easy task. It was a lot of data to absorb, a lot of applicants to review, a lot of great businesses in our community. We were able to award 47 grants to the community. totaling $250,000. And I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate the council. I spoke with each council member individually about this, and to a T, you all were incredibly supportive. And so I just want to thank you for that. My approach has been from day one that we're not going to wait for the federal government to step in and help our small businesses, which I think is the backbone of this city's economy. So I'm really proud of what we've done. I also am proud of the fact that we've had upwards of a dozen other cities across the state reach out to us and ask us for our information because they want to recreate that grant program in their community, which I've said from day one, you can copy and paste as far as I'm concerned. We're here to help out others if we can. We certainly didn't do it perfectly. We learned a lot and we'll continue to learn a lot, but I appreciate all your support. So with that, I just want to thank you again for all the efforts that you're making. I know Mr. O'Connor will probably touch on this in a little bit, but I appreciate our federal partners as well. I talked to our Congresswoman Susan Brooks this afternoon for about 45 minutes, just discussing some of the federal programs that have laid out. They have appropriated $350 billion that is earmarked to go to small businesses. And as Mr. O'Connor can attest, as of this morning, they had already given out about $240 billion of that, which again, I can imagine if city government can be sometimes a Titanic to turn, I can only imagine what the federal government has been like. And I know they have been moving very quickly to administer those dollars first and foremost to small businesses. So just on behalf of a very grateful mayor, just thank you for all that you have done to step up as a council to support our efforts and our team going forward in this process. So that is the report I have. We're always happy to answer questions going forward, but thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to say a few words.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does anyone here have a question or something they would like to say to the mayor while he's here? Nope, we're good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next item on the agenda for tonight are the council committee reports. I believe we have one, right, Mr. O'Connor?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Council members, the Finance Committee met April 9th. We had a very robust conversation, as you might imagine, with everything that's happening. First and foremost, I want to thank the mayor and the team that he just outlined for putting together a program in such a quick order and moving things along for small businesses. The first item we discussed was the lofts on 10th Street, which is on our agenda this evening. So I'll let Mr. Murray talk about that in some greater detail. But it comes to you with a favorable recommendation. Secondly, we talked about refunding the 2014 Redevelopment Authority bond for 146th Street, which was originally done in 2006, was refunded in 2014, and now with the rate environment that we're now in, there's an opportunity to further reduce the cost of the bond to the tune of about $1 million over the life of the bond, or about $150,000 a year in interest savings for the taxpayer. So Mr. Spalding is going to continue to pursue that. There's no action on the agenda this evening for that, but that should be forthcoming. The Small Business Resilience Grant we discussed, the mayor just went through all that detail, but again, I think that was a Herculean lift to get that done in the amount of time that it was put together. And to the mayor's point, I think the $350 billion that was appropriated by Congress is essentially allocated. I don't know that it's fully allocated, but it's close. So I've spent the last 2 weeks of my life trying to circulate dollars through the Payroll Protection Act, and it's been interesting to say the least. But the dollars will start flowing. It's not happened as quickly as I think some people may have expected, but there were some glitches on the front end, but it's moving forward. So I think a lot of the small businesses that may not have been able to take advantage of the grant will hopefully, if they got in line for the payroll protection funding, we'll start to see some of those dollars come their way here either this week or next week. We talked a bit about the mayor's capital projects. There are several in the works. I think the mayor has spoken with each of us individually to some degree about these projects. I won't go through all of those here this evening, but there's a number of those that are either in process. But most importantly, I think we've got funding lined up and allocated for the projects, which will allow us to continue to forge forward. Some of these may be pushed a bit because of the COVID-19 situation, but by and large, we've got funding assigned to these and we'll be able to move forward. And then Mr. Spalding did a very nice job of going through what some of the impacts from COVID-19 might be for the city from a property tax perspective, potential impact to TIF districts as a result, the deferral of property tax payments, etc. The good news for the city of Noblesville is we've got $27 million in reserves available to absorb payments that need to be made, so we don't have to worry about any kind of liquidity issues. But nonetheless, I think Mr. Spalding's actually looking at some different options from a liquidity perspective, just in case we need a backstop. But the good news is we've budgeted well and we've got liquidity available to handle situations. So I guess for the public, from the public's perspective, we're in a good financial position to weather the storm. The claims come to you with a favorable recommendation. And Mr. President, that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Is there a motion to approve the claims?
Mr. President, I would move to, this is Peterson, I would move to approve the claims.
And a second?
I'll second that. That's O'Connor.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. This is a roll call vote to approve the claims. Ms. Lees.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz, are you there?
Aye.
Hey,
Yeah, there he is.
welcome. Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles,
Aye.
Mr. Air, Mr. Air, you may need to unmute. I'll come back to you. Mr. Boyce?
There, he said aye.
There he is.
There he is.
Okay, Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Okay, and Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
9-9, the claims are approved.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lees. Moving on to new ordinances for discussion. Council to consider ordinance number 10-04-20, an ordinance providing additional appropriations in the general fund for the funding of the Small Business Resilient Grant Program and establishing a public hearing.
Mr. President, I would make a motion to introduce ordinance 10-04-20.
That was Darren and Mark Boyce seconds.
Mr. Jeffrey Spalding.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and controller, and the ordinance that you have in front of you is directly related to the topic of discussion earlier, what the mayor talked about, the Small Business Resilience Grant Program. And it's actually step one of a two-step process by which we're going to allocate the funding and put the funding in place to support that program. So this first step, which is an additional appropriation ordinance that requires a two council meeting action with an introduction and then public hearing and adoption at the next meeting. That's what you have in front of you, and this is appropriating money from the general fund to the Economic Development Department for the purpose of funding these grants. And then step two, which you will see at the next council meeting, is a cash transfer resolution moving $250,000 from the rainy day fund to the general fund to basically supplement the general fund for the purpose of these grants. So the ultimate source of funding for these grants is our rainy day fund for all the logical reasons that you might imagine and that had been discussed, an unusual event and, much needed and unusual response. And so we're tapping those rainy day fund resources to provide the funding. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Spalding. Any questions for Mr. Spalding? Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry. Mr. O'Connor.
I believe we need to establish a public hearing at the next meeting for ordinance 10-04-20.
Second?
Okay, so we will need to have a roll call vote to establish a public hearing for April 28th. Ms. Lees.
Pardon me, I'm looking. Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles,
Aye.
Mr. Ayr,
Aye.
Mr. Boyce,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
9 aye, the public hearing is established.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Lees. Moving to miscellaneous number 1, the council to consider resolution RC-17-20, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with Xander Co. Is it Xander Co., Xander Company, LLC? Mr. Murray.
Yep, Xander Co. LLC. Thank you, President Hampton, members of council. For the record, Andrew Murray, Assistant Economic Development Director. This item before you, I'm pleased to present Resolution 17-20. This resolution would approve and memorialize our partnership with Xander Co. LLC. This proposal, this partnership would cause the redevelopment of a half block to a mixed-use development to be known as the Lofts on 10th on the northeast side of our downtown. To give you a little background of the composition of Xander Co. LLC, we have Darren and Monica Pecht, as everybody know, our lifelong residents and respected business owners in Noblesville. And then we have Blake Anderson, who is an active member of the community and also resides not far from this project site. These are residents who want to invest in our community, who want to invest in our downtown, and want to invest in a hopeful future for Noblesville. So as a result, Mayor Jensen, his administration, this council, there's a lot to be excited about this project and partnership. I'm going to attempt to share my screen so I can cycle through some exhibits to better tell the story, so bear with me. Okay, so to quickly orient you, the subject property is the outline in orange. It's approximately 9/10 of an acre in size. And again, it's located on the east side of 10th Street. It is bound to the south by Clinton Street and all the way north to Wayne Street.
Is anybody seeing that? I'm not seeing it.
I cannot see it.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Yost, is there something, maybe one button that he needs to push?
Hang on. How about now?
Yeah, getting closer. Need to do share. There it is.
Yep, he's got it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll back up if you guys want me to. But again, this is the subject property, 9/10 of an acre, located along the east side of 10th Street, bound to the north with Wayne Street and to the south with Clinton Street. A little bit about the project. It is a proposed $7.7 million investment that would include 31,700 square feet of commercial and residential space. As you'll note on your screen, the structures include full masonry facades with a healthy amount of offsets and projections, as well as an undulating roof line, all of which that we feel will blend well with its immediate surroundings. Another important item to note, this project has 7 commercial spaces, all located in the south building, which is to the right of your screen, 4 of which would be a unique below street level grade, again, which is with keeping that historic feel. And then the residential space would then take up the first and second floors on the south building, and then the north building, which is to the left of your screen, that will be all residential units. As far as identified benefits to the city, to the public, obviously this project will increase downtown livability. The addition of 8,000 square feet of commercial space will result in immediate density and added energy, along with a unique rooftop meeting space in the south building corner, fronting on Clinton and 10th Street. This project will diversify living options in downtown with 23 two-bedroom apartment units. This project, and the unique nature, again, preserves and enhances the historic feel and character of our downtown. And then finally, from a land use perspective, this project removes and replaces existing uses with higher and better uses to the property that the public will surely benefit from. To summarize at a high level the public-private partnership, the commitments from the developer will include acquiring title to all the subject property. Right now, they hold title to the south portion south of the alley, and then they have currently under contract the north portion. We are also expecting them to make a minimum investment of $4.4 million and completing this project in a timely fashion and in accordance with approved plans and drawings. From a public participation perspective, I want to hit on 5 components. Number 1, we are going to provide $1 million to the developer for this project. That would be funded from downtown tax increment. That will be structured in the form of a forgivable loan. Those monies would go towards covering certain infrastructure impact fees, funding or reimbursing acquisition of real estate, and then finally demolition of existing structures and improvements to the project site. Again, the structure is a forgivable loan. With that, we will have identified milestones that will make it forgivable. But I want to make it clear to the council that we are not expecting this $1 million back. Second component, we are going to issue a bond that would produce a net amount of $2.3 million. The developer or the developer's bank will purchase these bonds, which those resulting debt service payments will not be an obligation of the city in the event of default. As you are well aware, this significantly minimizes and or eliminates the city's financial risk with this bond. The city's role with this financing will be to simply pledge the TIF revenue from the project towards the debt service on those bonds. And so to the extent there is a shortfall, which we don't anticipate, the developer would have to cover that shortfall to the debt service payment. Third component, we have agreed to waive certain public fees, including building permits, sign permits, and zoning approval fees. However, the developer will pay the required inspection fees to the improvements. We have committed to donating a portion of our star brick stockpile, not to exceed 6,000 star brick, to the project. And then finally, the city and the developer, we have agreed to an opportunity to share profits with this project through a participation agreement. And so those terms are still being negotiated and will be finalized before we close on the bond financing. But at a minimum, the developer has agreed to remit certain payments to the city based on the profitability of the project as outlined in that agreement. Procedurally speaking, if if all goes to plan tonight, this council can expect future business items to come before them to carry out the obligations of this agreement, including the bond ordinance and setting up the new allocation area. With that, I will close my presentation. Again, we certainly feel this project is transformative and will provide a signature product and experience at the north end of downtown and really set that standard for future investment on the east side. This resolution comes to you with full support from Mayor Jensen and his administration. And as Mr. O'Connor mentioned, it comes to you with a favorable recommendation from this council's Finance Committee. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any questions at all for Mr. Murray from council? Now, are Mr. Peck and Mr. Anderson there? Or do they want to, are they able to technologically get involved in this if they want to? That I don't know.
They were certainly invited, Mr. President, but if they're not on,
I think Blake was on at one
I thought so
point.
too, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. President, they are listed on there. They just, Mr. Anderson is muted and the other gentleman is just not speaking, I think.
Okay, so they do not have to say anything, and if they don't want to, we're fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murray.
yeah.
With that, we, if there's no more discussion or questions, we need a motion to approve resolution RC-17-20.
This is Mark Boyce. I will approve, make a motion to approve RC-20.
This is O'Connor. I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second to approve resolution RC-17-20. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Abstain.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Abstain.
Ms. Wiles,
Aye.
Mr. Air,
Abstain.
Mr. Boyce,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton.
Aye.
6 ayes, 3 abstentions. The resolution is approved.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Lees, and thank you, Mr. Murray.
Thank you.
Moving on to miscellaneous item number 2, council to consider an amendment to the amended and restated development agreement with the Interchange Diversified LLC. Mr. Howard.
Mr. President, members of the council, Michael Howard. I'm not in your meeting loop, but I am appearing by phone. I'll work on my technology before the next meeting. Essentially, this agreement was a result of the next item coming before the council. A little bit of history, rehashing what we talked about 3 weeks ago. In 2005, the city entered into an agreement with Interchange Diversified, which is a company that has many hats, but essentially Republic Development, concerning the development of the area out around exit 10 known as Saxony. At that time, Saxony owned just about all the property bounded by 146th Street on the north, 69 on the south, Bowden on the west, and Oleo Road on the east. The only land that they were not in control of was essentially where the town center is included. At that time, we entered into an agreement that had a presumed abatement schedule based on the square footage and the investment of a project. Historically, We were looking for assessed value. We had bonds in place, and that agreement has met our goals since that time. However, when the Opus agreement came forward, it did not, the 2005 agreement did not have the emphasis on job creation and total wages that the administration and I think this council wanted to see. So as part of an agreement recommended by the mayor, we did recommend a 10-year abatement for the Opus project, but wanted to, prior to considering that final abatement, amend the 2005 agreement to more clearly point out, for example, on section 2 of the agreement, section 4.1, that the increase and decrease in the abatement would be based on job creation, anticipated wages, and other relevant development factors. At your last meeting, I informed you that Interstate had approximately 80 acres that is undeveloped in this area. In talking to them more closely, most of that 80 acres is zoned retail and wouldn't be eligible for abatement anyway. In fact, they have 22 acres or 4 parcels remaining after the Opus parcel, which is zoned for commercial and would be available for abatement under this amended agreement. With that, I think I'll stop and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Any questions for Mr. Howard from the council?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
Mr. Howard, would it be fair to say I'm looking at the matrix here that I think is the presumed Exhibit L, that you really, to do the math, you really start with the average overall wage and then work your way back up to what the expected abatement might be?
Well, in the first page of Exhibit L, at the bottom, that talks about new manufacturing research and development agreement.
Right.
The part that talks about the considering wages is essentially contained in section 4.1 of the amended agreement back on the earlier pages of the agreement. So it's there, but it's not back on Exhibit L. And if you look on the first page of Exhibit L, it says the above presumed schedules may be modified by the council based upon anticipated job creation, anticipated wages, and other relevant factors as set out in 4.1. So we've kind of kept the presumption, but we have the ability to modify that presumption based on those employment goals. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I was just trying to correlate the abatement length with the average wage, and off the top of my head, I don't know what the county average is at the moment, but I think that's a good way to go at it.
Well, the section at the bottom of that page where it talks about the county average, that was included in the 2005 agreement, but only referred to as only applied to depreciable personal property.
Got it.
Mr. Howard, just so I understand, the additional 22 acres falls under this schedule for the abatement, but we could adjust for those 22 acres or no?
You have the ability to look at all the factors on a case-by-case basis, including wages.
Okay.
So this amendment to the 2005 agreement does provide for consideration of abatement, but it It allows you to weigh those additional employment factors as you deem reasonable.
But Mr. President, I have a question for Mr. Howard. So, Mr. Howard, then that for the Opus project, though, we're not taking into consideration wages, correct? So it wouldn't apply for this. For our
It
next
does
item,
not
but for future.
apply for Opus for a couple reasons. One, Opus is essentially a speculative development, but they anticipate that they will be providing room for an existing Noblesville corporate citizen, which is now on Bergen Boulevard. But you're right. This schedule that is in the agreement does not apply to Opus. But when Opus came in, we saw an opportunity to amend the agreement and get it more on line with the goals of the administration.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Howard? Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Mr. President, this is Peterson. I also had a question about this date. This development agreement does not have an end date, and I'm wondering if there are other agreements we have like this, or, I mean, the goals have changed, and if there aren't more appropriate development tools available to us to attract a different kind of, not that this is bad, but just to be more in touch with kind of what our goals are as a city now, especially under new administration, that I'm just leery of having open-ended. How many open-ended development agreements do we have left out there?
To my knowledge, Mr. Peterson, all of our development agreements since this point have addressed projects on a case-by-case basis. This was a situation where the city invested $23 million in infrastructure, all as a speculative investment of the city, and we wanted to keep it open and get as much assessed value out there as soon as we could. But to my knowledge and my recollection, we do not have any open-ended agreements. And this agreement is, while it might be open-ended on time, it is finite in terms of the 4 parcels that might be remaining.
So, Mr. Howard, then the clarification, because I asked at our last meeting about this, and that you had stated that there would be a sunset provision in these resolutions. So this is amending this current development agreement, but even in the item coming up, I need clarification of where there's a sunset period defined.
That was one of the issues that we worked on, and it was not mutually acceptable. I think when we found out that there were only 4 parcels left, 22 acres as opposed to 80 acres, I think that helps resolve the issue. This was not a pleasant, warm and fuzzy negotiation.
President Hampton, are you there? Do you mind if I chime in? This is Sarah Reed.
Yeah, I'm fine. Ms. Reed, go ahead.
Okay. I also spoke with Republic Development today, and just a little bit of clarity on top of what Mr. Howard said regarding the acreage available. Of that 22 acres that's remaining, like 7 of that is zoned industrial, which is something typically we would do. The rest of it's flex space. So when I talked to Sean McInnes at Republic, it seemed like it'd even be less than what we anticipated. So I just want to bring that forward, and as they come through on those projects, we'll keep you all posted. So despite the sunset clause, it will sunset itself when there's no land left available, which hopefully the economy will keep on going.
Any questions for Ms. Reed?
Mr. Hampton, this is Darren again. How do we then handle future requests from, say, tenants? That if we are still going to have people moving in and out of that space, relocating. Are they bound to this agreement also? the conditions of this agreement?
Well, once the abatement is granted on the building, in theory, the tenants can come in and want an abatement on the build out. In a facility such as this, I think we find that that's fairly rare. There's not the increase in assessed value from a shell to part of a building out part of a building is relatively de minimis. And if they come in and ask, you can grant it, but I don't want to make this trivial, but in most of those situations, in my experience, you spend more money counting the money than the money's worth. It's a de minimis number. If they do come in, however, you have the ability to request commitments on jobs, and if those commitments are not met in the annual reporting, you have the ability to revoke or modify the abatement.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Howard or Ms. Reed? If not, thank you, Mr. Howard. Thank you, Ms. Reed. We need a motion. I'm going to read this just because it's a kind of a motion to approve the amendment to the amended and restated development agreement with Interchange Diversified LLC. We need a motion to approve the amendment to the amended. And a second. Is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I'll make a motion that we approve the amendment to amended and restated development agreement miscellaneous number 2.
Mr. President.
Mark Boyce, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the amendment to the amended and restated development for miscellaneous number 2 and a second. This will be a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Peterson,
No.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles,
Aye.
Mr. Air,
Aye.
Mr. Boyce,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
8 aye, 1 nay. The development agreement is approved.
Thank you. Stay on the phone, Mr. Howard. Miscellaneous number 3.
I'm here.
Miscellaneous number 3, council to consider resolution RC-18-20, a confirmatory resolution designated an economic revitalization area for Opus Development Company, LLC. Mr. Howard.
At your last meeting, you addressed this abatement as a 10-year abatement on the building that is being developed by Opus Development. This building is a little over 150,000 square feet. If you look at the old Exhibit L, it talks about 70,000 square feet and $2 million of cost. This building will be $8 million. Obviously, that's partially a function of inflation since 2005. The developer, Opus Development Company, is a regional company that has developed these types of speculative commercial buildings. The property is located on the southwest corner of 146th Street and Bergen Boulevard and consists of about approximately 12.1 acres. As we talked about in the earlier item, the owner, Opus, is in final negotiations, which there's representatives online that will bring you up to speed on that, with Centrocept, which is presently located in the next spine building Next Spine is expanding. If you remember several months ago, they came in and sought an additional abatement on some of their equipment. They are expanding, and Centrocept is looking for a place to land in Noblesville. The SB1 provided by Opus gives the jobs and the payroll for Centrocept. It's a small business, but they're looking to take, I believe it was about 40,000 square feet. I have to look at this a little closer, of the 150,000 square feet. So this will be a big step in relocating the company, keeping some high-paying jobs in the city. We've worked with the mayor and Sarah Reed, Economic Development. This was kind of a touch-and-go agreement. It's based on what the agreement was prior to the amendment that you just passed, and is before you for final approval. There has been a notice of public hearing that included a call-in number for the public, and with that, I'll stop and answer any questions. There are also representatives of Opus on the line that may be willing to answer, or that are available to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howard. Any questions for Mr. Howard?
I'm just curious, this is Mr. Peterson. I'm just curious, does Centrocept have a lease or just a letter of intent?
Is somebody on for Opus?
Sure. Yes. Hello. Mike, this is Steve Harden. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. The council's important. They can hear you.
Yep, we hear you.
Very good. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the City Council. This is Steve Harden calling in, and Doug Swain is also on the call from Opus. But to answer Mr. Peterson's question, I think as we reported last time, there is an executed letter of intent between Centrocept and Opus. Since our last meeting, Opus has provided the written draft of the lease, and they're waiting on the comments back from Centrocept for that, pending the approval of the tax abatement as well. The current schedule is for the construction to begin. Doug, you can correct me if I don't say this correctly, in June of this year. And so everyone is very excited and thankful for the opportunity to be able to bring this project to the city of Noblesville. And on behalf of Opus, we want to thank again Mike Howard and Sarah Reed, Andrew Murray, Ali Krupski, and Aaron Head, who've all been wonderful to work with and been very helpful to shepherd this to the point where we are now. So be happy to answer any other questions that you all have.
Any follow-up there, Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, no, thank you for the answer. I was just curious, the SB1 that was submitted to the state for wages was submitted on a speculative business and not for a signed lease. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So this is really a speculative venture. Is that, I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and I agree completely that we're out of industrial space. We're desperately needing, and I invite this project. It just seems like this development agreement is maybe not the most appropriate for this project, but I mean, I do think we need this project. It's just kind of curious how it came about. So that's my question.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. O'Connor.
Mr. Harden, thanks for being on the call. Just question on when the anticipated completion of construction would be. Start in June. Wondering if it's December or what the completion date would be.
Mr. O'Connor, thank you for that welcome, and thank you for that question. If you could only see me in person, I was smiling as you were asking for a construction schedule during a pandemic, but we did talk about that question, and you actually picked the correct month. The current plan is to hopefully have Centrocept if everything goes according to plan, in the new building by December, but that could get pushed over into the next calendar year, depending upon availability of everything.
And I think you probably jumped into my next follow-up was, given the pandemic, has there been any slowdown? You see any anticipated pushback in timing as a result? Or is the construction market still there and people available to do the work?
Doug Swain, are you able to respond to that if you're on the call?
Yes, I am. Good evening. This is Doug Swain with Opus Development Company. To answer your question, generally speaking, we have not really seen that to a large degree, and the projects that we have in this region of the country that are under construction, we have really not seen a lot of absenteeism from the subs. Or otherwise, everything continues to move forward. We've not had really any projects shut down as a result of this. Of course, everybody's aware of it, and we have put into place a number of, safety mechanisms for all of our subs and our own employees throughout all of our job sites, which include social distancing and other measures. But we've not had a slowdown. We've not really seen a significant slowdown in terms of materials or otherwise. As well. So to answer your question, so far, it has been, we've been able to kind of move forward with all of our planned projects that we have, either under construction or well into the process, which I would classify this one as. We've, continued to move forward with all of our, structural plans and elevational plans and architectural plans and discussions with vendors, subs, and bidding out the projects accordingly.
Mr. President, I just had one more question. So, given everything that's happening and what I'm seeing in financial markets, do you have any issues on the financing side? I'm just a little nervous about what's happening out there in the financial world for liquidity reasons, etc. But be interested on your comments on what you're seeing or any impact on this project.
Was that directed at me? I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Yes. The debt markets have been, to your point, it's somewhat of another story a little bit. They have been moving around quite a bit, and a lot of them have been quite busy and really in some cases overwhelmed with the applications for the PPP program and otherwise. And we have seen some of that moving around. We will secure some debt on this property, but Opus has a strong balance sheet. This is a project that we're putting on our own balance sheet. We're not bringing in other partners for it. It's a well-capitalized project. It's a well-capitalized company. We don't anticipate that we fully anticipate being able to get debt. We've got a number of lenders that we work with as on a lot of different projects and various projects, and are with us on a lot of kind of our favorite lenders, so to speak. So we've had some outreach to them. We've not settled on exactly which lender we'll have for this, but we're confident we'll be able to put debt in place by the time we close on the project.
It's always good to have choices, but thanks for the answers. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions for the presenter, Mr. Howard?
Mr. President, I have a question or an edit for Mr. Howard. On page, what I would say page 3, item number 8, in the last line of that paragraph, it talks about that the deductions from the assessed value of the real property to be used for the hotel. I think we need to modify that to say for this industrial building versus the hotel.
Yes, thank you.
I caught it this time instead of
will,
Mr. O'Connor. Normally he catches it.
I will have that changed, and that page will be forwarded to Ms. Lee's first thing in the morning for the commercial building.
Thank you very much.
Or the project as follows. Thank you.
So we do need to amend what you have in front of you to make that change.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions or comments on this, we do need to open the public hearing for RC 1820. So consider the public hearing open at this point. Is there anyone on the line, Ms. Lees or Mr. Yost?
I don't know of anyone.
I do not believe there is any public comments, Mr. President.
Okay, so is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
having no public commenting on the public hearing for RC-18-20, I move to close the hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing for RC 1820. This will have to be a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Boyce?
Aye, sorry.
Again, to clarify, this is to close the public hearing.
Yes.
Just to clarify.
Yeah. Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
9-9, public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Mr.
Now we will need
President,
a, go, yes, go, Ms. Wiles.
I would move that we amend resolution RC-18-20 as discussed under item number 8 to reflect either project or commercial project, and that we move to approve it as amended.
Smith will second.
Do
We
we
have a
need that?
motion.
I think,
Say again.
I'm thinking. If,
To lean on you on this, because it sounded like she said it right to me. She said motion
Okay.
to, she first amended it and then made the
Yeah.
motion.
I think we'll be all right as long as no one wants to split a vote.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the amended resolution RC-18-20. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
No.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
8 aye, 1 nay. The amended resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Lee.
you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous number 4. Council to consider acceptance of conflict of interest disclosure. Ms. Lees.
Yes, this conflict of interest disclosure is for a firefighter who works for a company that does landscaping business for the city. Normally, this would go before the Board of Works, but these conflict of interest disclosures must be approved in a public meeting, and the Board of Works is not meeting right now. So we're asking for you to accept this conflict of interest disclosure.
Any discussion or questions from the council?
Ms. Lees, this is Mr. O'Connor. Do you know is Mr. Pitcock an owner or just an employee?
That is a real good question. Just a moment. I'm sorry, I haven't looked at it for a little while.
That's all right.
I can't say with absolute certainty, but I believe he is an owner.
Okay. Just curious. I mean, it's, I don't know. It does make a little bit of difference. I'm assuming they do work for the city in some way, shape. Maybe they don't. I don't know.
My understanding that he does landscaping work at some of the fire stations.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more discussion or questions? Then we need a motion if we do not.
Mr. President, I would move to accept this conflict of interest.
I would second that. This is Mark Boyce.
So we have a motion and a second to accept the conflict of interest disclosure. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees.
Ms. Wiles? Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
9 aye. The conflict of interest is accepted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lees. Miscellaneous number 5, the council to consider resolution RC-20-20, a resolution concerning the Small Business Resilience Grant amid the COVID-19 health emergency. Ms. Lindsay Bennett.
Good evening, Council. This is Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. This resolution is in response to some guidance that we received from the State Board of Accounts. They had received some inquiries regarding municipalities giving grants to businesses. And in response to those inquiries, they put out some guidance that said that the governing body has to adopt a policy in a public meeting that approves the expenditures as authorized use of public funds. And then they also need a written opinion of their legal counsel that that the expenditure has a legitimate government purpose and it's acceptable under Indiana code during the public emergency. So that is what is before you is they have set forth what they're looking for. We've put it in a resolution for council to adopt. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. And I don't know if I made that clear, but this is related to the Small Business Resilience Grant that Mayor Jensen discussed earlier.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Any questions for Ms. Bennett?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I'd make a motion that we approve RC-20-20 as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution RC-20-20. Roll call vote, Ms. Lees?
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
9 aye. The resolution is approved.
Thank you, Council.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Bennett. I think we made it through our first Teams meeting here. It has reached that point where it's council comments. Anyone have anything they would like to add tonight?
Mr. President?
Yeah, Ms. Lees?
If I could, I would just like to thank our IT director, Jamie Yost, who has put in many, many long hours getting this set up, not just for us, but for other meetings as well. He's really done a great job.
Yeah, he did. I do want to second that. He's helped us all through it as far as the connectivity, and I think tonight he did a really good job getting this all together for us. And I do also, all of us would rather be in council chambers tonight. There's no question. That's where we'd rather be to hold this meeting, but we're doing it because this is what we've been asked to do. We need to continue to be examples in this social distancing and continue to get the work done as best we can. And I do appreciate all the council. Thank you very much for your patience on this. And this is a tough time for all of us because it's when you want to kind of start bending the rules a little bit and you want to get out and you want to do more and you want to do this and you just can't. You got to, like the mayor said earlier, the governor asked us all to hunker down, and that's exactly what this kind of meeting is all about. We're hunkering down, and thank you for all of you guys and men and women of the council. for your patience.
Mr. President,
Yes, Wiles?
I would also like to just commend our staff members with Matt Light, Kayla Arnold, Sarah Reed, and Michelle Glodowski, who did a terrific job of putting together the parameters for the small business resiliency grants. For them to be able to put that together, evaluate 209 applications, narrowing it down so that the committee could take a look at those applications and then make a decision to try to get those dollars out to those businesses as quickly as possible really was terrific. So, Mayor, you have a wonderful staff on your hand, but I wanted to publicly thank them for all their hard work in making that move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Wiles.
Here, here.
Any other council comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And seconded. We are adjourned. Thank you.